September 3rd. This is the first NFL strategy show, not only of the season, but the first NFL strategy show ever done by Awesemo.com. We're going to run these Monday through Friday. We might even add a Saturday show, depending on how things work out. But I'm Dave Loughran. You know me from, well, the Deeper Dive, the strategy show, a bunch of other stuff. And our boy Sal Vetri. Brought Sal on for the NFL season. Really stoked to have him here. Sal, you've got a pretty decent following in terms of your NFL and other content, and we're really happy to have you on with us and happy to do the strategy show with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Lofty. Thank you. Yeah, I have started covering DFS about a year ago, just through blogging a little bit and mainly a YouTube channel, and excited to be here, excited to be doing this. Been watching you guys here and there from MLB, NBA. It's great stuff. I'm glad to be a part of it, man.
Awesome. So here's what we'll do. Just give you a quick rundown of how the strategy show is going to work. Mondays, normally we're going to take a look at, and we're going to have Manny Laura on with us during the week. We're going to have Chris Randone. Chris Spags is going to be on Wednesday. Sal's going to be on several times a week. So we got a great cast here for the strategy show. Monday, we're going to do a weekly recap. We're going to recap the week before, take a look at the big winners from all of the main contests, take a look at the perfect lineup. More importantly, especially being that Manny will be on with us on Monday, we'll take a look at the winning and losing strategies from that week, in terms of fantasy cruncher, top stacks, groups, you name it. Chalk review as well, the best and worst weekly performers. Today, Tuesday, we'll take a first look at salaries. And also Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Projections for week 1 are already on the site at Awesemo.com. We'll take a look at them. Normally we'll give you some waiver wire ideas for seasonal and take a look at snaps, targets, red zone looks, touches, you name it. We're going to mix everything in on Tuesday. Wednesday, ownership will drop. We'll take a look at ownership. We'll get a close look at matchups. We'll answer your questions. Thursday, full game-by-game breakdown. Sal will be with me again on Thursday. We'll take your questions as well. And then Friday, believe it'll be Manny, Laura with Chris Randone. They're going to do some preliminary crunches on Fantasy Cruncher, injury updates, revisit those Awesemo ownerships, and take a look at some top stacks and groups, and particularly even game stacks for the week. So, Sal, we get into it starting off today's show. Looking at a little bit of news here before we jump into salaries. We'll take a tiered approach, look at the tiers, and break down where we think the better plays are for this week and where we could get into some trouble. The big news right now is Ezekiel Elliott and Melvin Gordon. It's been ongoing. If you listen to this SiriusXM Awesemo radio show with Manny Laura and myself, we discuss it almost every weekend. But with Zeke and Melvin right now, we really don't know what's going on. There's been conflicting reports on Elliott. One was, it looks like they're going to have it done by the end of the weekend. And then another report came out an hour later saying it's maybe a 50-50 shot it gets done at all. And now Melvin Gordon, they've postponed contract talks until the season's even over. So from a fantasy standpoint, what are you doing and what are you projecting for both of these teams?
Yeah, so just taking it from DFS standpoint right now, as of an hour ago, there's another update on Zeke, Cowboys making progress in these Zeke discussions. So it's just back and forth. I personally think he'll be on this team by week 2. I don't think you come to the table and you say that you're getting close. It's sort of like a nibble effect almost. It's like you're trying to get everything you can at that point. You piss off the other side of it. Then you go back to the table. You're at the same point. You're making progress. So either way, though, I'm not going to be touching Zeke, obviously, if he's not going to be out there. Same thing for Melvin Gordon. In drafts season long, I'm taking Zeke wherever I can. I had one last night. I was at 8 pick. I wish he would have dropped. He didn't. In terms of Melvin Gordon, I'm not touching him. Last year, he was quoted during the Le'Veon Bell incident to be saying he would be doing the exact same thing. He would sit out an entire year. Well, now he's in that situation. So what makes us think he's going to change his mind from any of the actions that he's done? So I'm totally staying away from Melvin Gordon. Definitely in season longs. In terms of Zeke, I'm taking him wherever I can. Just my own personal beliefs that he will be back. The discussions seem to be going fine. The things that come out in the negative sense, for the most part, just seem to be more media hype at it. And it doesn't seem like anything coming out in a positive sense gets the same amount of hype for obvious reasons. So DFS-wise, I think for the Cowboys, Tony Pollard, it doesn't make too much of a huge impact in the short term. You could still roster a guy like that, especially when we get into the pricing on it. And on the other end of it, I think there's some very interesting things for the Chargers backfield that we can get into for week one based on salaries and just overall opportunities for Ekeler and Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Pollard on DraftKings is $4,500. And you obviously have Alfred Morris. They brought him back, apparently feeling comfortable with his ability to, get in some work if Zeke were to be out. But I think the biggest thing here is they cut all but 2 running backs, not including Elliott. So It's really tough to believe that they go into the season with just Tony Pollard and Alfred Morris. But let's just assume that they don't get it done by week 1. Do you see Tony Pollard being chalk at 4,500? And would that be the right chalk play, being that Alfred Morris could still be in the mix?
Yeah. So they, like you said, they made their cuts to the 53. They only had 3 running backs. People were saying they promoted yesterday, I believe, Chun back up to the 53-man roster, which made things look negative for Elliott in terms of contract talks. But that's going to be nothing in terms of, in my opinion, and what it's really going to matter. But week 1, it's going to be similar to, if you guys remember, Spencer Ware last year, where not as good of an offense, but just overall the way that you have offensive linemen locking up another one for the long term today in Dallas in a good situation. And then Tony Pollard's skill set in general. Kind of my stance on it is, if you have a pass catching running back who's going to go into a good situation, offensive line, a good matchup, and he's just has all the opportunity in the world. And Jerry Jones has already said he can shoulder the load of a 3-down back roll. Opportunities in the red zone will be there. I don't care what the ownership really comes in at. Obviously, for cash, it doesn't matter. But for tournaments, at 4,500, similar to Spencer Ware last year, we had everybody across the industry, for the most part, playing this guy in terms of Ware at 90%. I expect the exact same to be happening in terms of individual crunches at ownership levels. I'll get as much of them as I need to and as I want to, and that number is probably going to be very close to 100% if that's the case.
Yeah, it's going to be tough not to. And then on the other side of it, looking at someone like Austin Ekeler, listen, I'm not a huge believer in the guy's ability to shoulder like a full workload. I have similar concerns about Duke Johnson, but we'll get into that later. With Austin Ekeler, I think he's a quality running back, especially given his ability to catch passes and be super effective out of the backfield as a receiver. But is Austin Ekeler worth, say, 5,500 against the Colts team that likely won't be able to move the football all that well with Andrew Luck retiring? And how much involvement do you think Justin Jackson sees, assuming, and it looks like Melvin Gordon won't be there for week 1?
Yeah, so this is the side of it that I'm a little bit worried about. Austin Ekeler right now, last year, if you take the small 3 to 4 game sample where there was no Melvin Gordon, he was seeing 17 touches a game, about pretty much right on every single game.
They won all of those games too.
Yeah, and then you see on the other end of that, Justin Jackson, like you talk about, he was seeing towards the tail 2 games that 9 touches a game. So you're getting somewhere in like a 65, 70% run for Austin Ekeler. And in a vacuum at $5,500, that's fantastic. But it being week 1 of the regular season, there being so much soft pricing, you're going to get maybe 70% of the load for Austin Ekeler against a Colts team that does funnel 2 short passes, running backs, middle of the field. And you have a bad offensive line with the Chargers. So Phillip Rivers, if anything, is going to have to check down more so to running backs, tight ends, middle of the field, crossing routes. So all that does favor Ekeler. But when you look at him outside of the vacuum, you have guys around him in price points very similar. You have right there at $5,700, getting it up right here. You have $5,700 Chris Carson. You have Dalvin Cook at $6K, Fournette at $61. All these guys right around him that probably see 80+% of the workload in their backfield, compared to him and Ekeler seeing maybe 70% is what I would project at best with Justin Jackson back there. So 5,500, he's in play, definitely GPPs. It's just a matter of, do you really trust, depending on where the ownership comes in, trust those opportunities compared to other guys in just as good of situations, if not better, with more opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And while we're on the topic of this Chargers Colts game, I'm sure you've done plenty of best ball drafts recently, any type of seasonal draft. I got in on a bunch of the ones over at Draft because they're super addicting and it's hard to stop. But I've noticed like Jacoby Brissett's actually getting some attention, and I don't know if all of it's normally I'd be like, it doesn't make sense. This guy's not good. He proved it to us 2 years ago, but I'm not sure all of that is misplaced, because Frank Reich is a brilliant offensive minded coach. And if anyone could at least get Brissett good enough to move the football, enough to score points to at least stay competitive, it might in fact be Frank Reich. And I find it pretty interesting too that this Colts team in week 1 opened as 3-point dogs. They're only 6.5-point dogs right now, which might seem like a lot, but touchdown dogs against the Chargers in LA, not to say they have many fans there, but you know what I mean. It seems pretty unusual with Brissette at the helm that Luck would only be worth 3 points, 3.5 points.
No, I totally agree. I saw that yesterday, just the actual thinking about like the point spread difference, 3.5, 4 points, whatever it was. It seems like it should be much more. So there's some sort of confidence, I would imagine. But then you compare it to a guy like Aaron Rodgers when he was going out, the line moved 6.5 points, which even that seemed low.
Right.
So I'm not really sure what they value overall there in terms of those quarterbacks, because I would say Luck is very similar to his team, especially in this sort of a matchup. Now, there's no Derwin James out there to go up against Brissette in this specific matchup. But I mean, I'm still worried. The implied total isn't favorable for him. Overall there, the line isn't something that I feel that secure about. So $4,400, yeah, for a cash play, people will get to it. I'm going to be staying away from it, in especially a week 1 where there's everywhere value. The lines have been out for their salaries 2 months now. It's not something that I have that much faith in overall. Really in this entire Colts offense, outside of potentially a Marlon Mack as a guy who's just going to be really touching potentially down, like you said, 6.5 points, 1 score trailing for most of the game, getting some more pass catching work as they've hinted at in the preseason, and maybe that comes to fruition in week 1. But for Brissette himself, yeah, the price point's great in just overall vacuum, but I'm not too confident in actually rostering him in really any format. Big reason why is just the total, and you still have all those great cornerbacks out there for the Chargers, probably maybe the best trio.
Yeah, and we'll get there when we start talking salaries in just a moment. But one more piece of news. LaShawn McCoy cut by the Bills. So basically now you've got Devin Singletary and Frank Gore. Let's see if he'll vulture touches and well, I would say touchdowns, but I don't know how many they'll score this season ahead of Singletary. Singletary saw himself shoot up in redraft leagues, really anywhere after this news. But from a DFS standpoint, you've got him going up against the Jets in a game that has an over-under of 40. It's up from 38, but an over-under 40. He's $3,600. Is Singletary worth targeting here on the road in a game where they're dogs, but not exactly facing a juggernaut offense in the Jets?
Yeah, I mean, and this is something just recently kind of coming up, like you were saying, in redrafts, him spiking a little bit, the price point obviously being static with Draftkings, not moving at all. He's somebody who's going to garner attention for GPPs only. But right now, it's kind of a wait and see. Against the Jets, this is one of the best fronts in the entire league. Like you said, not an overall positive game environment. Probably the Jets want to play at a faster pace, but we'll see if that actually translates. Probably going to be a slower paced game, at least middle of the pack in terms of league average, probably below if I had to project it, and did project it right now. And you take into account that that backfield is somewhat loaded still. You have Frank Gore, who I personally believe, when I see reports and just the community right now talking about Frank Gore being back there, I don't think I weight that too much. He's going to be somebody who's a pain in the side of a Singletary or whoever wants to break free in that backfield with Yeldon there. But Frank Gore is 36 years old. He's kind of had the benefit of his body being in just warm weather in domes for the past however many years, his entire career. Now he's going to Buffalo, which is the complete opposite of where he was when he's in Miami.
Yeah, that's going to suck.
Yeah, he's going to tighten up after every single game. I mean, he'll be stealing short down usage, probably early touchdowns on the goal line. But then you also have TJ Yeldon back there. So right now at 3,600, the price point, I have Singletary right now on my own personal sheets, kind of labeled as like a questionable play to see for GPPs. But I lean not to get there just because Yeldon is another guy who caught 85 passes the last 2 years in Jacksonville. He'll be involved as well. I have Singletary on a ton of regular season redraft teams, and I'm very high on him for where you get him at ADPs right now. If you haven't drafted, scoop him up in 7th, 8th round, wherever you can get him. But for week 1 right now, especially with the matchup, it's not something I'm interested in. I kind of want to see how this pans out. The price point's tempting, but probably not going to get there.
Yeah. I think it's something that shouldn't go overlooked is that, as you mentioned, TJ Yeldon is still in that backfield.
Yeah.
He's not a particularly impressive specimen, but he might still be involved as a pass catcher. You know, in what Singletary's last year in college, he had 6 receptions, 19 the year before that, 26 as a rookie. So, I mean, is he capable? He is, but how much will they use him? It wouldn't be surprising to see one of these games where he isn't nearly as involved as people suspected him to be. So I think, like you mentioned, in tournaments at 3,600, what happens if he does come out there and it's a tight game? It is a divisional game. Generally, I hate to be anecdotal because I don't have the actual numbers, but a lot of these divisional games do usually stay close enough. But Singletary's cheap. I don't have an issue with it, but we will get to some other running backs to discuss there. And Duke Johnson isn't on this slate, not only because he's no longer on Cleveland, but because the Houston Texans aren't on the main slate. So we'll get into that when he is, but not going to waste time on teams that aren't playing on Sunday's main slate. All right, Sal, let's do it. Let's jump into our salaries here. I'll first let you know, though, that we're doing a monster giveaway at awesemo.com. Win a 1-year pass of NFL Awesemo Plus, right? A 1-year, $249 value. All you got to do is retweet, like, and reply with the total number of passing yards Aaron Rodgers throws on Thursday night against the Bears. So that's it. Retweet, like, and respond with the total number of passing yards you think Rodgers will throw against the Bears on Thursday night to kick off the 2019 season. You know, 1-year pass of NFL Awesemo Plus. Not everyone that does that, of course. What we'll do is we will draw 2 random winners from the finalists on September 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And that's all you got to do. So follow Awesemo_com and Awesemo NFL. It's the pinned tweet at Awesemo_com. So go ahead, do that, retweet, like, and reply with Aaron Rodgers passing yards for a chance to win a full year of Awesemo Plus, value of $249. Gift from us to you to kick off this NFL season. All right, Sal, let's jump into the salaries. We'll take a bit of a tiered approach here. We'll start at quarterback. At the top, obviously, Patrick Mahomes facing the Jacksonville Jaguars. They opened at 5-point favorites. They're 3.5-point favorites now. This game has a pretty robust 52.5-point total, which is, look, usually you don't see that with Jacksonville. It's kind of just a testament to how good this Kansas City offense was last year and how good they're projected to be again this year. As far as we have over-unders compared to the rest of the slate, 52.5 is the second highest. Actually, no, it's the highest because Houston and New Orleans isn't on this slate. And you have no Andrew Luck. He was the second highest priced pitcher. Going to use Draftkings salaries here. We'll work into some other sites as we move along. Jameis Winston and Cam Newton above the top, and Baker Mayfield as your top 5 priced quarterbacks. You know, there's this sense that we don't love paying for top tier quarterbacks. Not all the time, but we usually have value, particularly in week 1. What are your thoughts on this top tier, and is it worth spending that much on a QB?
Yeah, I mean, the big piece is what you just said. We have so much value that you can get to if you really want to prioritize it, any quarterback you want, and you really don't have to prioritize it that much. $7,200 for Mahomes, that's kind of where he was for the majority of the tail end of last year, and I was not getting there and probably losing a lot of money the whole entire time I wasn't. But $7,200, you can get to it. There's not much to say that's bad. Last time I checked, highest team implied total at 28. The defensive matchup's not great. Last year when he faced Jacksonville, the one time he had 2 interceptions. He finished as a middle-of-the-road quarterback that week, right around average. So I personally am probably not going to be getting to $7,200 Mahomes in GPPs. Big reason why is just not getting too deep into stacking right now or anything like that. I don't see too much there outside of maybe a Kelsey that I like going with Mahomes with. But outside of him, and again, cash he's fine to go to. He has one of the highest ceilings and floors at the quarterback position. That's exactly what you want in cash, especially focusing on the ceiling part now as the game gets more and more competitive. But Cam Newton is somebody that I have a lot of interest in for week 1 in this upper tier. The questionable tag by his name, I imagine throughout this week, people are going to get less and less scared of that. I don't even know why people were scared really this week all that much. After 2 days after he injured it in the preseason, the walking boot was off. He was moving around fine. He was jogging in practice. He was a full go, good to go in week 1, they said, or in practice on Monday, first practice of the year. So I hope the questionable tag drives ownership down. Not too sure that the ownership will matter too much in that range anyways. But yeah, I have interest in Cam Newton in that matchup. 23.75 team implied total. It's right around average to above average. It should be a very high-paced game if we're just going off of, or fast-paced game, going off of plays run last year to these 2 teams, especially the Rams, being up there as a top 5 team in pace. So I have a lot of interest in Cam. The weapons there are fully loaded. McCaffrey, obviously. Olsen back, older but healthy. Then you have the guys in Curtis Samuel becoming an emergence on the outside and DJ Moore. I like Cam a lot at that price point. It's just a matter of do you want to spend up at quarterback. or relatively spend up to Patrick Mahomes with Cam at 6,500. I lean right now no, but it's not sure. It's early in the week.
Yeah. By the way, when I said Andrew Luck, second highest priced pitcher, I think we all know what was meant to be said. I struggle with the crossover, man. I struggle with the crossover.
No, that makes sense. You're transitioning out of it.
Dude, Sal, when we go from basketball to baseball, I call catchers centers for like the first month. It's unbelievable.
That makes sense. Yeah.
You see the C tab and you're like, okay, center.
Yeah, now we got the end of the NBA DFS season is about to start approaching this MLB season. So it's start to get real ugly.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, I mean, look, we'll get there. And anybody watching knows that Andrew Luck isn't a pitcher. Well, he's not a quarterback anymore either. Jameis Winston, though, man, I know you touched on this a little bit. If you've been in the seasonal fantasy circles, and by the way, mentioning seasonal a decent amount because it kind of allows you to get a pulse on what week one will look like. Jameis Winston has been a very hot topic of discussion. Now, it's not like his ADP has risen really high. You know, he's still going around like 12, 13, 14 at the quarterback position, but he's definitely had hype around people that have a good idea of, you know, how fantasy points are scored. In Awesomo's week one projections, he has him as the second highest projected quarterback. And one of the biggest reasons for that is Jameis Winston, even under Bruce Arians, is expected to throw a lot of passes. And this team's defense is likely going to be a sieve once again. The secondary is going to struggle. They're likely going to allow a decent amount of points every week. Does Winston justify the price point there just based on the volume and the fact that interceptions are only -1 points, not -2 or -3 or anything brutal like that? So he can be a little reckless and still probably get you where you need to go. But he is the second highest priced QB.
Yeah, I mean, I have interest in Winston a little bit less than Newton in that way, more than Mahomes, and it's really just a pricing thing at that matter. It's just sort of a personal thing of the same quarterbacks in terms of what you're going to get as sort of a variance of outcomes at the quarterback position for especially week one when guys are just underpriced everywhere. These guys have those opportunities in terms of pass attempts, some less than more, of course, but relative to the other positions in running back, wide receiver, tight end, you're not going to have nearly the same sort of small variance like you do on a quarterback position for the amount of opportunities that those positions will be seeing. So overall, Winston specifically, yes, I think he's going to be great. It should be a very fast-paced game. A nice total at 25 for the team. The weapons out there are endless when you have a Mike Evans, Godwin, probably the most hyped up player this entire preseason right now.
Yeah, and O.J. Howard, man. That whole offense is hyped heavy outside of the backfield.
It's insane. Yeah, exactly. It's insanely hyped up. And just the backfield in terms of that, watch out for a guy named Dar Ogunbowale, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
The third stringer there. But yeah, the offense is fantastic. It's just really a pricing thing right now. And I think any of these guys that you go with aren't a bad decision. It's just how do you like the rest of your lineup?
Yeah, no. By the way, no idea how to pronounce that. I won't pretend that I do. But I've been snagging him late in drafts because, first of all, even if he can produce as a third down back, like Ronald Jones, I liked him coming into this season. It sounded like he had looked really good in camp, and then he just completely disappointed. Limited work, of course, and preseason only tells you a little tiny bit of the story, but Peyton Barber might be the worst starting running back in the league. And even with ample opportunity to cut into that workload, Ronald Jones seems like he hasn't done it. So I'll call him D.O. He seems like he could have some value, not in week one, but a guy that I'm paying very close attention to going forward.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And like Ronald Jones also, they kind of downplayed it in the preseason, but he had knee inflammation for about a week through there, and then they downplayed it to it being nothing, but knee inflammation never seems like a good thing. I mean, we have right now Todd Gurley every single week. People are worried about knee inflammation with him. So that's just another kind of thing to throw on for there. And then a pass catching running back in Ogunbowale going to be right now a third down pass catching back in that offense. It just seems like it makes sense.
All right. So moving down a bit, Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, Matt Ryan, Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
These are the guys in that 6 to 6,300 range. Wilson, not a high volume passer at all last year, but a whole hell of a lot of touchdown passes. He loses Doug Baldwin. He gets DK Metcalf. Although the Metcalf injury makes things even more concerning. Not really necessarily sure how much of an impact he would make early on anyway. But you've got Wilson as a low volume passer. We know they're going to run the hell out of the football, but they're big favorites here against a bad Cincinnati offense. So you have Wilson here as a open at 7.5. They're 10-point favorites now at home. And then another one that interests me in this, well, you know what? You can touch on these guys, all of them. Jared Goff, you mentioned you expect it to be a shootout in Carolina. And Lamar Jackson, not someone we expect to carry us as a passer, but someone that was rushing at a ridiculous clip last year, going up against a porous Miami team that likely won't have the ball in their hands very often to begin with. This is an interesting tier here.
No, yeah, it definitely is. And this is the beginning of where I start to like really emphasize for just my personal lineup making and player pools and things of that nature. So starting with Russell Wilson, Cincinnati last year, they have not done much to improve at all. Their secondary, really much of their defense, gave up top 5 points in terms to the quarterback position. Russell Wilson last year also did not have a rushing touchdown, did not run much in the red zone at all. He still was top 5 in the league in terms of rushing yards. So you have that boost in terms of a mobile quarterback with most likely not in a 1-week season, but for season long, the upside of regression for rushing touchdowns is just evident when he had 0 last year. And then you factor in a couple of things. You mentioned that they're going to run the ball a ton. And definitely in the second half where you're leading, that's always a concern. But they also want to start to incorporate more and more passing. And that's a big reason why Chris Carson became a hype train as well as Chris Godwin this preseason. Because they have no Mike Davis. He went out. He's gone now. He's in Chicago. And the gap between Chris Carson and Penny widened. So you're going to have a pass-catching running back, which is always going to help a quarterback. We've seen it all of last year really start to exemplify. 2 years ago is when it really started, the pass-catching running backs. That's going to help Russell Wilson. And just the matchup overall, I like the spot for Wilson. 6,300 is where I start to really like the lineups that I get to everywhere else with that quarterback upside. So, yeah, with Russell Wilson, definitely in play there. He has a better offensive line. They started to get better in the beginning of the year last year, just atrocious, probably the worst in the league. They started to get better. They returned, I believe, if not the entire line, 4 to 5 guys on that line. So that's good to see, and it's going to only get better from there, you would imagine. So that's the stance on Russell Wilson. I think he's fine. But, yeah, Lamar Jackson overall is probably just the guy that stands out this week against Miami. No pass rush on Miami. No pass rush last year. No pass rush this year. And now you're facing a guy who is potentially going to lead the league in rushing, not only at the quarterback position, but at the running back. No, I'm just kidding. No, at the quarterback position. Right? Yeah, no. So he said they came out, said they're going to throw a lot more, run a lot less. I don't buy that. You know that the way that this guy's going to play, they had a whole offseason to kind of put in somewhat of a new offense, but it's not going to totally eliminate probably his best tactic, which is going to be able to scramble and use his legs, create deception, whatever it might be. So, yeah, Jackson at $6,000 in a spot where he's not going to face any pressure and can do really whatever he wants. Just seems like a great overall opportunity to just have more rushing attempts. And then if you're not a buyer in his arm strength or just his accuracy at all, having that extra time is definitely going to help. So $6,000 is a fantastic price point on a guy whose floor in the rushing game alone might be 6 points.
Yep. Yeah, they're going to throw a lot more and run a lot less until they realize he can't throw.
Yeah.
Look, has he improved? My guess is you can't actually get worse than you were last season. So, yes, will it be market improvement? I don't know. If it is, that'll be great. But I get asked this question all the time. Lamar Miller or Kyler Murray? Lamar Miller or Ben Roethlisberger? Sorry, Lamar Jackson, not Lamar Miller. The big thing is if you're playing in 6-point passing touchdown leagues, that changes everything. But in 4-point passing touchdown leagues, which Draftkings is, which Yahoo, which Fanduel are, Lamar Jackson has a high floor and a pretty solid ceiling just based on the rushing abilities that he has. No quarterback's going to run like him, and it makes a big difference. So do you have any interest in pairing him with like a Mark Andrews, another, hyped up guy in fantasy circles this year? You're not going to have to pay a premium for him. Is there any interest in any pass catchers here you also have they don't really have many pass catchers is the problem. That's really the biggest issue here. You have Miles Boykin, who literally looked like their best receiver in the preseason. It's tough to get a gauge on that. At least Mark Andrews, average depth of target will be short enough for Jackson to hook up with him. But if there was ever a solid naked quarterback play, it would be Jackson for sure.
Yeah, and definitely the naked quarterback play. That's where I would prioritize. Jackson last year, just more things to add on. When he came into the league last year, took over for Flacco in that offense, he was a top 10 quarterback from the rest of the year on out, and he led more than Patty Mahomes by a wide margin. In terms of fantasy points per dropback, it was 0.84 or 87. I believe it was 0.84 fantasy points per dropback. He's going to take way more dropbacks this year. So I expect a lot from Jackson season long in this matchup, especially. But then, in terms of stacking with anything, I don't have much interest. Andrews is the guy who started to get hype in this offense. The tight end looked his way a lot last year, but he also wasn't running a lot of snaps last year. He was running on 55, 60% of the snaps, which is just going to generate your target opportunity. And none of that changed in the preseason this year, albeit on a smaller sample. But when the starters were on the field, Andrews was still on a snap count of around 55%. Other tight ends like Boyle came in for more snaps, not much of a pass catcher there either. But if anything, I think you can't really stack in terms of going with an attack for stacking your quarterback with another running back in terms of Mark Ingram. But if they're going to run so much, that's going to be the game script. If there is any correlation at all in terms of a stack, they're up and they're going to be running with Mark Ingram because of the fact that Lamar Jackson is having a good game. I don't really consider that much of a stack, but there's just no pass catchers out there that I have really any interest in.
I hear you. We've got YouTube chat talking about Mark Ingram being the guy this week. And I think that's worth discussing because while I've never been a huge Mark Ingram guy, it's going to be a spot where they should run the ball quite a bit. Miami just lost Laramie Tunsil. Their offensive line, Pro Football Focus already had their offensive line rated to be the worst O-line in the league. And now they've lost Tunsil. So I really don't see how they sustain any drives on the ground or through the air. And that plays pretty heavily into time of possession, which, more time of possession always works favorably for running backs like Mark Ingram. Do you expect this to be a 70-30 split between Ingram and the rest of this backfield? How do you see it shaking out against the bad Miami defense?
Yeah, right now Ingram's a guy who's not so much on my radar. The price point's definitely nice. What you said, 70-30 split, sounds about right. And if not, maybe worse. So here's a couple of things. You have Lamar Jackson, like we were just talking about. He's clearly going to cut into that, not only goal line, touchdown upside in the red zone on the ground for Ingram, but also just everywhere else on the field. And then Justice Hill is a guy that they already announced, the rookie there, that he'll probably be the primary backup to Mark Ingram and also be on the field for plenty of third down opportunities. So lots of pass catching opportunities, which we know in Draftkings is a huge bonus. So for Ingram, there's upside there at that price point, but I think there's much more downside, not only from his quarterback, but the rookie not really pushing him, but going to take some snaps from him, especially in the coveted spot of having PPR format in DraftKings.
All right, so bottom tier or lower end quarterbacks here. Let's go from the sub 6K mark. Rivers against Indy, Dak against the Giants. We can go down the list. You can hit me with your favorite options here. Carson Wentz, 5,700. I mean, you've got Carson Wentz priced outside of the top 10 at his position, coming back from an injury, seemingly 100% healthy. Monster 9.5 point home favorites against Washington. Josh Allen against the Jets. We know, if there's anyone capable of putting up similar numbers to Lamar Jackson, it would be Josh Allen. Kyler Murray. Dude, I'll tell you what, there was hype there, but that shine wore off quick after some of those preseason games, man.
Popcorn era.
Yeah. Not saying it's justified, but shit, people backed off a little bit. Cousins against Atlanta. Stafford in a pretty solid matchup against Arizona. And I think one of the biggest things there, and then I'll turn it over to you, is when you look at this football team, the Arizona Cardinals, Patrick Peterson, you haven't heard a whole lot about this, but if he's out for this game, which he is, that kills their secondary.
Yeah, it's already bad.
Yeah. So what's your take on your cheap quarterbacks? Feel free to talk about any that I didn't touch on, and then we'll move over to the running back position.
Yeah, this range is fantastic. So, I mean, starting all the way up at the kind of the top end of this with Prescott, I have a lot of interest in Prescott for the year, for this game even. It's just a matter of what the pieces around him look like. Is Amari going to play? It seems trending to be okay. And then obviously the Zeke situation. If Amari's in, I care much more about that. That offense completely changed when he came mid-season last year. If Zeke's out and Amari's in, I still have a lot of interest in Prescott at his price point of $5,900 in a very good matchup against the Giants. But moving through this range, so many options. I'll touch on Kyler Murray. The shine did wear off, I would say. Still high on him season long, obviously career. But for this game, don't have much interest. If we're using last year's sort of paces and plays for each team, this game would grade out as the slowest paced game on the entire slate by a wide margin of like 5 plays. So I don't have much interest there. Not only that, it's week 1 of this offense. Again, you can say what you want. Very small sample of the preseason. Did not look great there. I don't weight that much. But again, it's week 1 getting everything going. I don't expect this to just be the air raid like they're saying it is right away against a very slow-paced Detroit team, even if they want to play much faster. You're going to have inefficient drives that end early just due to the fact that this kid's a rookie and they're getting the pieces moving. So I don't have much interest in him. So Prescott stands out. And then going down a little bit more in this range, there's a couple of plays that, like you said, Carson Wentz, that is one that really stands out. Second highest total on the slate the last time I saw, 27.25 points. Wentz in his career against Washington has just lit them up. A defense that I would argue their pass rush is almost non-existent. Their secondary is overrated, to say the least, or the nicest way to say that. Landon Collins, definitely good. Clinton-Dix, not the greatest in my opinion. So just moving down from there, or Clinton-Dix now out to the Bears. But so Landon Collins out there is pretty much all they have. The cornerbacks, some of the lowest PFF grades on them. Wentz has a full team right now of just weapons all around him. Double tight ends are going to be on that field much more. They were one of the highest teams that ran double tight end sets, and it's just been so far in the last 3 years, if you're looking at the stats, one of the most effective ways to attack a defense is running 2 athletic tight ends, usually across the middle of the field in Ertz and Goddard. They kept all the pass-catching running backs that have a lot of upside. Miles Sanders, the rookie. They have Jordan Howard, who will be more of a goal line but can still catch the ball. Darren Sproles is who they signed, and then Corey Clement. So all across this field, you have weapons. So, Wentz for me at 5,700, second highest total on the slate. He seems fantastic. And the whole range is stacked. I mean, you have Kirk Cousins we haven't even touched on yet against Atlanta, a team that was very injury-riddled. And I'll kind of point that out as Atlanta kind of got scapegoated last year as a very bad defense, which they were. But a lot of that kind of can go towards, or maybe not a lot, but a good amount of it can go towards just tons of injuries. I mean, Deion Jones, a big piece of why they were terrible against running backs or pass-catching running backs, and overall just the league is. So I still think it's a good matchup for Kirk Cousins, probably one that in tournaments might get a little bit more ownership than warranted. I want to see where that comes in later in the week. But this range is great. And Nick Foles is somebody that I think we should have a conversation around because that game seems to be one that can be a shootout.
Yeah. I feel like when this Eagles team runs 12 personnel, the mismatches and the matchup nightmares that guys like Goddard and Ertz are going to cause in the middle of the field, it's going to be very tough for opposing defenses to overcome that, especially having the speed of Deshaun Jackson on the outside and a big body like Alshon Jeffrey on the other side. I mean, if Wentz is even half decent, he should be able to move the ball at will.
Yeah, and then also I think a lot of people just forget often that Josh Norman isn't a guy who's going to shadow Alshon Jeffrey. Right. Jeffrey has had his way with Norman too, if you look at past matchups in their one-on-one matchups, but he's going to stay on one side of the field. So they can move anybody they want to get even more of mismatches, just taking into account the tight ends that they already have. So Jeffrey can be on whoever he wants in this game. Aguilar doesn't have great numbers with Wentz in those games, but still a veteran who has had success, especially last year, sort of a breakout in the slot. Yeah, the offense is absolutely loaded and honestly probably underrated this preseason.
I'm with you, man. Hey, by the way, the NFL Strategy Show, sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. If you've yet to get over there, check out some of the contests they're running. Really solid. No management fee, $1 million baller. Only 10 entry max. So 10 entries max, no 150, no MME. You're not going to get up against 150 from a number of people. $25 entry. Every dollar that gets put into it by the players comes back out to us. And $1 million prize pool, $100K to first. They've also got the $100K, the $25K, $1 to enter. Some great contests. So if you haven't signed up yet, very simple. I will post a link in the YouTube chat. We can't post the Yahoo links in there. There were some issues with that. We're not allowed to do it. But what I can do is on our Spotlight Hitters article for baseball, it's right at the top of that. We're going to make an easier way to access it going forward. But the link is right at the top of the article. It's totally free. And when you sign up through us, you get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points, which you can use as good as cash. It's the same as cash to be, you can't go buy, Slurpee at 7-Eleven, but you can play on the site as actual funds. So I'm going to post that in there. Sign up through us, get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points, and get in on some of these awesome upcoming NFL contests that, many of them 0% management fee. What comes in from us comes back out to us. Just threw it in chat now. That is Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Oh, never mind. They won't let me post that either. Just go to the Spotlight Hitters article under the MLB tab. Completely free. You'll see the link. Cool.
Yeah, that's where you should put just your first amount of money this week is into that tournament.
Right? I mean, seriously, yeah.
You're making money by putting it in there. I mean, if you turn it around, you think about like investing, you're paying somebody to take your money and invest it. You turn it around, it's the exact same type of thing with a management fee. You're just not doing it up front, so it doesn't feel like it, but you're making money by playing that tournament compared to DraftKings.
Yeah, no question. Last year when they did this, I deposited for really the first time on Yahoo.
Yeah. No, me too.
Just to get into it. And, I'll redeposit again. All right, let's talk some running backs, Sal. We're making good progress here, but both of us are long-winded, so this should be fun. Elliott at the top, 9,200. It's tough to say what's going to happen with him. I think he'll be on the field. Let me get a quick answer or quick question. Go to quick answer because we already discussed it. If Elliott does play in week 1, are you confident that he'll be conditioned enough and ready to go and the same Ezekiel Elliott that we've seen in previous seasons?
Yeah, I think he's going to be better. I don't know if that's bold to say, but yeah, I mean, this guy, he's been like posting updated conditionings just for all the doubters out there, like on Twitter or whatever it is, of just him right now. And he's just in a better shape than he was as a rookie years later. And he exemplified his pass catching rule last year. People think that he got, or it's going to hurt him that Amari is there. His targets and catches went up after Amari got there. So yeah, I have a ton of interest in Ezekiel Elliott if he's playing, and that's something that we obviously have to keep an eye on. Already ruled out on DraftKings right now, but obviously don't go by that.
I'm with you. I think it's a non-issue for sure. Yeah. At the top of the position, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Todd Gurley, David Johnson. We'll go down to 7K here. Le'Veon Bell, Joe Mixon. Melvin Gordon's up there, but who the hell knows what his status is right now. If he plays, I actually think 7,500 on Melvin is perfectly reasonable against this Indianapolis Colts team, which I think their defense is respectable, but he just gets such a monster workload that it might not matter. And they should have control of this game offensively. But let's talk about it. Barkley against the Cowboys, huge road dogs, but we know what Barkley does regardless of score, regardless of game flow. He is very expensive though. McCaffrey at home against the Rams. What is the spread on this game? It is, you have it up here?
Yeah, I got it up. 1 sec.
3-point dogs.
Yeah, right there.
So 3-point dogs, 50.5 total? That's pretty nice. And then Gurley against Carolina, questions surrounding his workload. Died off a little bit, but there's still some concerns. And David Johnson against Detroit. Everyone thinks that Cliff Kingsbury is going to turn him into David Johnson of 2016. Let's hope it's the case. Let's hope it's the case, but who knows if it will be. So that's what we've got here. And then Lev Bell against Buffalo. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for this top range, like not even touching on what's below right now and just the value that is on this slate. The top range, let's just say Zeke isn't playing. My main interest at this top end, and probably in terms of, unless being a contrarian play for some tournament lineups, is just Saquon Barkley right now. We can get into all the other pieces of it. But Barkley, even being a road dog, something like you don't usually target, the guy just doesn't matter. He's going to be the number 1 wide receiver on this team come week 1. Shepard most likely playing, so I guess you can debate that, but should be seeing 8 to 10 targets out of the backfield, 20 touches on the ground. The only concern is, do they actually get to the red zone all that often? For season-long purposes, seeing Daniel Jones, play very well in the preseason, probably the best quarterback in the preseason, that kind of helps some confidence. But week 1 with Eli, who knows? But yeah, Barkley, just the upside there in the floor is ridiculous. I mean, you probably have a built-in floor on Saquon Barkley in the receiving game alone of somewhere around 8 to 10 points. And that's just ridiculous. Not even saying that he might be the most talented running back, pure rushing in the entire league. So $9,000, what you're doing there, whether it's a tournament or a GPP, is you're just locking in a ridiculously high floor with probably the highest ceiling on the entire slate.
I hear you. What do you think Lev Bell's workload looks like?
Yeah. So Le'Veon Bell right now kind of shapes up for me as a contrarian play, going to have lower ownership, but not somebody that I even have interest in. So Buffalo, to begin with, this might be drawing just stone cold in terms of having an awful matchup to start this out. Workload in general, it's very scary that Adam Gase has so much confidence in Ty Montgomery. I mean, I'm a Packer fan. I think the guy is talented. They let him go way too soon. But Ty Montgomery was getting all the hype in the preseason. Le'Veon Bell's comments and Adam Gase's were that Ty Montgomery's going to be on the field a lot. And I don't know how often he'll be on the field with Le'Veon Bell, but either way, that's taking into the short pass short catches that you like to see out of Le'Veon Bell. That's where his upside comes from. And also signing Jamison Crowder, putting him in the slot and hyping him up that he's going to have 100 catches. He's not going to have 100 catches, but he'll see a ton of looks. We do know that Sam Darnold likes to target the slot receiver going back to college with Juju Smith-Schuster. So there's going to be a lot of potential short, intermediate, and passes just in general that you would usually like to see go to Le'Veon Bell that I'm not too sure go there. Factoring in the matchup, the price point is obviously fine. It's a low 7K range, but I'm not sure I get there overall. Slow pace game probably on hand here, low total. Very tough matchup in Buffalo, one of the better defenses, one of the best defenses last year. And Ty Montgomery is actually pretty scary. What do you think about Ty Montgomery just in general? Because the way I'm looking at it is he's actually going to be on the field.
Yeah, it's really difficult for me to say because coach speak is a killer, man. Yeah. And sometimes what they say is legit. Sometimes it isn't. It's really tough. Like you look at Trey Quinn in Washington. Oh, he's got the tight end job, the slot receiver role locked up. You know, he's going to be a huge part of this offense. Or how about Bruce Arians saying that Chris Godwin is someone that can do everything and I can play him anywhere on the field. So he can play 100% of snaps and we want him to be a 100 reception guy. I mean, just that one thing alone boosted his ADP in seasonal leagues. So
like 3 rounds.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, look, a lot of targets voided in Tampa Bay with Humphreys and Deshaun Jackson gone, but you're paying a ceiling price for Godwin because Mike Evans is still there.
Yep.
Either way, I digress. I think that Bell will still have a really big workload. Buffalo's defense though isn't bad. Like this could really be a 7-3 game going into the fourth quarter. So I just think there are better scripted games and other running backs where we can get similar volume from. Like, let's talk about Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
Because you're right. If Ty Montgomery's involved heavily in the passing game, that not only hurts Bell's value, it kills it at this price point. What I mean by that is he has not been a particularly efficient running back, right? Even in Pittsburgh, you look at his yards per carry, Le'Veon Bell, the last season he played, averaged 4 yards per carry. So granted, 2 seasons before that, very efficient, but let's just take 2017, for example. He had 85 receptions on 106 targets. That's huge in PPR leagues, right? Almost 700 yards. If he's just used, or not exclusively used, but most of it on the ground, and Ty Montgomery's coming in a lot on third downs, it hurts him a lot because you have other backs similarly priced who are going to do everything for their respective teams. Yeah. Duke Johnson is out of Cleveland now. Kareem Hunt can't play till the second half of the season. What are your thoughts on a $6,400 Nick Chubb? Because I think, look, here's what I think. I think this is another spot where Cleveland's offense will be on the field a lot. Their defensive line is going to bludgeon Tennessee's offensive line. They got suspensions. They got injuries. They got guys that are no longer there. I don't see them standing a chance. And I think Nick Chubb gets a ton of opportunity. Cleveland probably creates some turnovers in favorable positions. But do you think Chubb is involved as 3-down guy hands down here? Because I don't know who would really be behind him.
Yeah, I think he is. And again, this, I guess, comes down to coach speak. But they've been saying it that he's been working very much so as a 3-down back, lots of pass catching opportunities, emphasized on just extra drills for pass catching. And they say he looks great. I mean, he has the capabilities of doing it. It's just a matter of, did he have the chance to with Duke Johnson there, signing Kareem Hunt? But now he has a chance to for at least the first half of the season here, potentially more if he can lock up just 3-down back role. I think the price point's fine. I think he's a fine overall play, but I just think what we're about to get to below, there's just so much in terms of for your dollar, what you're getting in better matchups. I mean, Tennessee last year, they gave up the bottom 5 in the league in terms of the amount of points they gave up to the running back position. Now, it's a whole year difference. Some things change, but this is still a pretty stingy defense. I think Chubb, though, 3-down opportunity at 6,400 is fine. There's just other guys I'm going to be looking to. And just not to go too far back on Bell, the one thing that I think we have to kind of emphasize here is he didn't just sit out a year. He sat out 20 months. Well more than a year is what Le'Veon Bell was off the field for. So you can say that he's going to be the same thing he was almost 2 years ago, not just 1 year. But we have to see it first, especially in that matchup. But yeah, I think Chubb's fine, but we're about to get to the range where I think everybody is fixated on for good reason.
Mike Bucket says, I have a meeting I have to cancel if this show goes 3 hours. That's great. Mike Campbell, it's a Laffy show, so yes, it will. My fault, boys. Don't worry. We'll get through it. It won't be that long. But if it is, sit back and enjoy it on this wonderful Tuesday, late morning, early afternoon.
What can possibly be that important in that meeting?
Right. What is more important than,
or more enjoyable, we should say.
Exactly. What's better than the first NFL DFS show of the season at awesomemode.com? By the way, happy to have all you guys with us. It's been fun so far. And if you enjoy the show, hit us with a thumbs up. It helps us out. It supports us and the site a lot, and we greatly appreciate it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell as well while you're at it. All right, so there you go. You just alluded to it. Some guys below Nick Chubb. Who are your guys, let's say, above 5K? I won't bother reading all of the names off to you, but just a few of them. You have Kerryon Johnson there. Dalvin Cook against Atlanta. We're going to have ownership tomorrow morning, by the way, on this show. We're going to talk ownership, preliminary ownership. It will change a lot throughout the week, but it's great to take that opening look. I think Dalvin Cook's going to have some ownership at that price, Sal.
Yeah, definitely. Cook's going to have ownership. It's warranted. I do think people are going to over kind of just state the bad defense in Atlanta. I do think it's much improved. I do think as they got healthier last year, it was improving, but still fourth worst in terms of how many points they gave up to the running back position. Second most catches to the running back last year. And overall, it's not even what the matchup is. It's a favorable matchup, and Dalvin Cook has been getting a ton of hype, looks good in this offense, and they've already said last year they cut down, and they want to make sort of, if you think of Kirk Cousins as what they did with Joe Flacco, they want to make him more of a game manager in a way. They cut him down from having 27 pass attempts in his career to like half of that, or they cut him down to having about half of the pass attempts, 40% less last year. And that only favors Dalvin Cook if he is healthy. Came in when he was healthy last year, started to become a top 10 back. Again, very limited sample in those weeks. But yeah, you have to like him. The ownership's going to be there. It makes sense for cash and tournaments. It's just a matter of, you can play chalk in tournaments in NFL. There's just so many options. It's just a matter of, is that the place that you want to play the chalk? But this range in general, I have more interest in other guys, honestly. And the first one I'll talk about is Leonard Fournette. I think this is a guy as the week goes on that, if not right now, people don't have interest in him. Watching shows or whatever it might be, he's going to get blown up to being probably a highly owned player.
Especially with that line moving in favor of Jacksonville too.
Yeah, the line movement's great. Vegas, sharps, whatever you want to say, they're on that. But just look at his backfield and just everything that's happening. Very quiet in the offseason and very quiet in the preseason. His stock was rising and nobody was noticing. Alfred Blue going on IR was kind of the peak of that. So the guy who maybe was going to get some third down work is gone. They have an undrafted. So what they kept on the roster behind Fournette at the running back position was a rookie in Armstead, who they drafted, an undrafted free agent who just got cut by the Saints in Divine Ezekiel, if I'm saying even that one right, and then a fullback. So not much there for competition. He'll probably be a 3-down back against a team that, believe it or not, gave up more points to the running back position last year. The Chiefs, again, their offense was just off the field so much, it hurts the defense. Overall, they gave up the third most to the running back position last year. So this is a great spot for Fournette, who should be a 3-down back. His team has a 24.5 implied total. That Jacksonville-Kansas City game is probably going to end up being one of my favorite, if not my favorite stack to go towards for game stacks, team stacks. Fournette at 6,100, you have right there, if you want to call it a pivot, I don't think it's going to become a pivot, but off of Dalvin Cook, those two guys just stand out. And then we have more. We have Chris Carson. And I guess for you, what is your take on both Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette, if there's any ownership concern? Again, we don't have it yet, but just in general there.
Yeah, and by the way, on Thursday, you'll be back with me. We're going to talk about some chalk and possible pivots as well. It'll definitely be a fun discussion. Look, you make a very important point. What is the backfield depth in Jacksonville?
Yeah.
Short answer, nothing, right? There really isn't anything there to give us any concern of there being serious competition. So, I mean, what? You don't even have Alfred Blue. So I think a simple way to look at this is volume trumps efficiency. And that's one of the simplest ways to do it. Now, if you thought that Leonard Fournette was going to, or if you thought the Jags were just going to get rocked, right? Get their doors blown off by halftime, sure. But that's not what we've got according to Vegas. Like, this is actually moving towards Jacksonville. They're still 3.5-point dogs at home, but that's not that much. So Leonard Fournette, in both of his first two seasons, was not efficient on the ground. It was just, he had a massive workload when healthy. Hell, they even ran the ball like crazy when they were playing from behind. So I think the big thing here is what you pointed out. If he's involved as a pass catcher, it takes him from a decent play to a really good play solely based on involvement in the offense, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how much I make of this, but the guy's already scary. I tweeted the other day that, I mean, the Mortal Kombat spike that this guy has in him on a stiff arm, I mean, that has to happen too. But no, I mean, he said that for a month he secluded himself on at least in the article I read, an undisclosed island, and is now in the best shape of his life. Again, some personal talk right there on whatever he was saying about himself, but there's some dedication and sort of maybe a prove-it year for Leonard Fournette, and now there's zero competition where Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison, the rookie there, is going to come in and spell him and sort of that Latavius Murray style role on potentially third downs and closer to the goal line, which is a little bit more of a worry than it's being reported right now.
Wouldn't it be cool if you could just pick up and head off to a secluded, deserted, private island and not tell anyone about it?
The way this report was, it sounded like he was on some mischievous island, like this, like scariest thing, not like a deserted island you think it's going to be fun. Like he was in, I don't even know, chains and stuff, just working out. It was –
That's crazy. Yeah.
It made it very dark, and like he was just like Rocky going at it.
Well, I can respect that, man. Yeah. We got a statue of a fictional character in our city. His name is Rocky. So, yeah, I'm all about it. But I'm with you on Fournette. I'm really anticipating what ownership looks like here, though, with Fournette and Cook and how that moves throughout the week. I think they will both be pretty popular. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chubb get some ownership, though. Cleveland's been hyped all year long. Duke Johnson's gone. Kareem Hunt's not there. All of these 6K guys, these low 6K guys, to me, could have a pretty significant impact in terms of ownership. Below 6K, does anyone stand out to you? Top value for the running back position?
So, I mean, right now, Tony Pollard will, and we kind of touched on that, but getting away from Tony Pollard without much news right now, below 6K, it's not, or below 6K or 5K, did you say? 5?
No, below 6, below the Dalvin Cook range. Yeah. But honestly, the 5K range doesn't seem to be all that fruitful.
No, yeah, below 6K, there's definitely options if that's where we're looking. Chris Carson being the most popular one is what I would imagine in that range. Going up against Cincinnati, which has just been putrid against pass-catching running backs last year and just overall everywhere on defense. In a spot where he should get more work. Like we said, he's going to be a favorite, a pretty decent-sized favorite, a team that likes to run the ball. And then the biggest piece as to why his ADP for season-long average draft position was rising. He's now, no Mike Davis, he's going to be the main pass-catching back on this team, 3-down back. The preseason did nothing to help second-year, first-round pick last year, Rashad Penny, who's just looked terrible on this team.
Yep.
And now Chris Carson's going to be a 3-down pass-catching back on an offense that already threw the ball 25% of the time last year to the running back in a very sneaky way because they just didn't throw a lot. It was easy to do that. And now they want to throw it more. So $5,700, this range in general seems just like cash locks everywhere. And there's just so many that you can't even lock them all in. So Carson below 5K is a guy that I'm probably going to get to. And then Ekeler, the conversation there starts. And when we talk about those other guys that we've already said, with Fournette's workload, Carson's most likely a very heavy workload. Even with Madison in Minnesota, it is sort of a worry. But it's not as much of a worry, in my opinion, as Justin Jackson for Austin Ekeler at 5,500. So he's definitely in play. He's somebody who's interesting. But below 6K, the guy who kind of rises to the top, $5,700 for Carson. If you can like dynamically change these Draftkings prices, he might be a guy that touches, based on the hype, based on all these role changes that we're getting out of him right now, a high 6K, low 7K range, honestly.
All right, here's a really fun discussion. Two cheap guys, then we'll talk receivers, tight ends, and be out. The Philadelphia Eagles right now on this slate have the second highest implied total. Okay, they're at 27.7. Expected to score, I almost said plenty of runs, plenty of points for the Philadelphia Eagles. 9.5-point home favorites. It's a favorable spot, no question. We already discussed the dynamics of this offense and the potential strength here with Jackson and Jeffrey and Goddard and Ertz. And there's a lot, but we haven't talked about the backfield.
Yeah. Jordan
Howard and Miles Sanders. There was all this talk. I was doing Awesemo Radio on Sirius XM throughout the summer and spring, and there was all this talk about how, man, you got to be worried about this backfield. There's so many mouths to feed. Like, dude, Josh Adams and Wendell Smallwood led the team in rushing last year. Not because they're good, but because they had nobody else. They were so bad that their two leading rushers from last season just got cut. Okay? There was no real reason to worry about that. In my opinion, it's going to be a two-headed monster between Sanders and Howard. How that breaks down, I don't know. How Clement and Sproles are used, I don't know, but I think it'll be very sparingly in the offense outside of special teams. But as such a huge favorite at home with such a high implied total, we got to talk about this backfield because it's likely that one of them has a decent game.
Yeah, and the back end of that with Clement and Sproles, I think especially for this game as huge home favorites, very little usage, if anything, in terms
Agreed.
of pass heavy guys. Yeah, so it mainly comes down to Sanders and it comes down to Howard in terms of where you see rushing attempts going. Mid-20s is how many attempts they had per game last year. If we just use that and we get it down to maybe around 20 for an initial type of projection, if this is split each way, you're getting 10 carries for each of them. Is that enough? Now, maybe if they are up big, they're going to run more. If anything, I probably like Jordan Howard a little bit more. Sanders is the guy for the whole season, maybe by week 4 or 5, can kind of break away. Last year, you hit on it. Not a lot of guys that are that great in that backfield. Nobody was really breaking out for double-digit carries every single week. Nothing above 12 carries per game other than 4 times last year from 3 different running backs. So I'm staying away from it. It's a very favorable spot on paper if you just look at it and go, oh, this team, whoever their running back is, should be in a really good spot. But even with just 2 guys back there and then kind of dips and dabs are going to be taking one here and one there in terms of carries from Corey Clement and Sproles, probably a couple carries each there. It's just going to cut into it enough where, if anything, maybe Jordan Howard for touchdown upside. We don't know exactly what Sanders is going to look like yet. Lots of hype there. I have a lot of faith in him just being wearing the hat right now, Penn State. But I'm staying away from it. Very cheap, definitely, but just lots of other options that are also cheap. Not as cheap, but I think favorable spots, definitely point per dollar-wise.
All right. Jay says, can't believe they actually drafted another running back. I'm done with Philly RBs until they cut at least 3 guys. Well, they did cut a bunch of guys, and they drafted a guy that is going, unless, barring a bad injury or a complete bust, which doesn't seem to be the case, I don't see how Sanders isn't the guy of the future. So, yeah. I mean, you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with him coming out of the draft and why he went in the second round, which is talent, that's talent in the second round, high talent, was his hamstring injury coming out, and they didn't know how bad of an injury it was. Really, not much was disclosed on it. But yeah, I have a lot of faith in him. Can't really speak on my own stuff. Watching him in person at Penn State, lots of similarities to Saquon Barkley, which makes sense when you're practicing for 2 years together and the whole summer together. So yeah, it's just a matter of can he break free in this backfield.
All right, fair enough. And by the way, if we miss any players, we do so knowing that we have this show running throughout the entire week. We will get to everything. I promise you that much. We'll just do it in a different format from here to here, but we like to talk. So if we hit on everyone, I'd probably run into the 5 p.m. Deeper Dive show, and that wouldn't be good. So let's do wide receiver, tight end, and bounce. Odell Beckham. Look at all these questionable marks. They're fine. But a lot of Q tags up here. Odell in his first regular season game for the Browns against Tennessee. Julio against Minnesota. Mike Evans against the San Francisco 49ers. Tyreek Hill against Jacksonville. Talk to me about this top tier. Keenan Allen up there as well. And I guess you could throw Amari Cooper in. All of these guys 7K plus. I think there's some good names here. But I also think there are a couple spots I'm likely to avoid. When you get to this part of the wide receiver tier, the top tier, it is so easy to get it wrong because they get peppered with targets each week, no matter the matchup. And so many of them are just good enough, big enough, strong enough, and athletic enough to come through at low ownership oftentimes. How are you breaking down this top tier of receivers in week 1?
Yeah, so a couple of names stand out depending on sort of the format you're going to play in, but maybe not even. So the first one, Julio Jones is going to be a guy who might be at some of his lowest ownership on the entire year. Part of that is lineup construction, lots of cheap running backs, and then you get to pay up for the expensive running backs. Tight ends, you can do whatever you want with them and get to however many tight ends in terms of the pricing that you want. So Julio Jones is a guy I have a ton of interest in, honestly, and it seems like it might be a bad spot, but if you look into it, Xavier Rhodes right now is just a name, and that's pretty much it. Last year was his worst season of his career. He was ranked outside of the top 100 in terms of PFF grades for a cornerback. And it's Julio Jones at $8,000, which I would say is a cheap price point. I have a lot of interest in Jones for GPPs. Even it's growing on me for cash as well at that point. He's always going to project out nicely just due to targets and his overall historical data for yardage. So I have a lot of interest in Jones on the top end. It's hard not to like Keenan Allen, though. I wouldn't be shocked if his ownership starts to skyrocket as the week goes on. I kind of hinted at it earlier that this Indianapolis Colts defense is a funnel defense, which helps running backs, but it also helps guys who are going to be in the middle of the field. What else helps Keenan Allen is that Tyrell Williams, who ran more than 33% of the snaps last year, and out of his snaps out of the slot, is now going to be opened up to Keenan Allen. If you've been following fantasy football, and in any aspect for DFS, even if you're out of the slot and you're a talented wide receiver, you can do so much more than just running straight up the field against the guy. You can do so much more against a worse cornerback usually. So middle of the field for a guy who's going to have more snaps out of the slot against a defense that funnels it to that spot. And then also terrible offensive line for the Chargers. They're going to have to check it down to running backs and short passes. Keenan Allen, to me right now, stands out as probably early on in the week, like a top 5 wide receiver, one of the best wide receiver plays. That increased snap percentage out of the slot is probably going to go undernoticed, or at least right now is. So Julio Jones, in terms of maybe, as of right now, kind of contrarian, Keenan Allen, and then Mike Evans is just hard to get away from against San Fran, 7,900. We've already hit on how much hype this offense is getting. And out of all that hype, Evans is the guy probably getting the least hype. And did he not lead the league in receiving last year? Was he top 2? Did he lead the league in receiving?
Who, Mike Evans?
Yeah.
No, Julio had, I think 1677.
Yeah, Mike Evans up there, top 3, top 5, whatever.
I think it was behind Hopkins and Julio.
Okay, yeah. So even top 3, just a guy who Godwin, OJ Howard, all these guys are taking just all of the hype away from him. I wouldn't be shocked if his ownership starts to lower. Game stacks are going to help that come up a little bit, but not nearly enough. So those are the 3 guys, at least in the top range, that Keenan Allen's price and above, that stand out the most to me.
Dude, I'm with you. I don't mind fading some of the, not fading, at least coming in underweight on some of the highest owned top tier wide receivers, again, because they're all so damn good. Like if Evans is coming in at lower ownership against San Francisco in a game that I think we can project to have a decent amount of scoring, a 49.5 point total, one of the highest on the slate, and they have one of the higher implied totals. I love it.
Yeah.
I think Godwin's interesting because the hype on him is huge right now. We've talked about it. Something interesting to consider here, and I mentioned it in our wide receivers article, Bust Breakouts and Sleepers, that we posted on awesemo.com earlier this year, completely free, by the way. Godwin saw the 24th most red zone targets in the league and 4th most targets inside the 10-yard line last year in the league. But Jameis threw only 7 of those 16 targets. And the reason I mention that is because Mike Evans had 14 red zone targets, but 11 of them were from Winston. Yeah. So when Winston was on the field over Fitzpatrick, there's no question that Evans was still his number 1. And until I see that change, Sal, I'm going to continue to believe that that's the case again in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right 100% on that right now Evans is the number 1 wide receiver out there. He's Winston's probably favorite target.
Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of targets to go around, by the way. I
think the main piece of Godwin that stands out the most to me is that preseason, he was on the field a lot. They played a whole quarter in that preseason week 3, a whole half in that preseason week 3. And he played every single snap. So you're going to get snap percentage out there higher than Mike Evans. It's going to be marginal. But then the biggest thing is just in the slot is where Chris Godwin is going to live this year. They're going to be tons of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. He's going to be in the slot. He was in the slot on every single 3 wide receiver set in the preseason, which was a good sample of around over 50 snaps. So I have a lot of interest there. Caught a touchdown in the preseason, but that only increased the hype machine. But I agree, in that range where there's so many other options, just like running back, if he comes in ridiculously over-owned, you can get away from it. But also at the same time, you can pick your pieces in the NFL where to play your chalk because there are just so many more options than any other sport in terms of there's going to be realistically 30 to 40 to 50 wide receivers rostered across the lineups this week for week 1, if not more.
Right, absolutely. And like I said, if Winston's averaging upwards of 38 passing attempts per game, there's going to be enough to go around, right? I mean, 8 targets per game at that rate is only a 21% market share for Godwin, assuming that's what he gets. It's very doable. I mean, it's very doable. It just means that Evans is also going to see a ton of work.
Yeah.
And like you said, he'll probably be lower owned than Chris Godwin. Where are you at on Galladay? Coming off a 1,000-yard season, even in redraft, I thought he was going a bit too low just based on being the number one there. You know, Marvin Jones is a fine number two, but Galladay coming off a very strong year, 1,063 yards, and I think he only builds on it this season. No Patrick Peterson in Arizona for the first 6 weeks, and this game, while it's probably projected to have less points than you'd want, the Lions have a 25-point total and are 2.5-point favorites on the road. Where do you stand on Galladay at basically the same price as Godwin?
Yeah, honestly, I probably should be looking at Galladay a little bit more because that range right around there is where you're getting a lot of hype in general, that Godwin range where you have a Tyler Boyd, you have a Tyler Lockett. But Galladay is a guy who this defense in Arizona, if it's not already known, is atrocious. And that might actually hurt their offense in terms of just how often or their offense might actually hurt that just based on the fact that they might be inefficient. Defense goes back on the field more. And it can get really ugly in terms of how many plays they want to run out there. But Galladay, the only concern, but at this price point, not much of a concern and probably lower ownership just due to that range with Godwin. The only concern is just more mouths to feed out there. If anything, he had his ups last year, but he also had a ton of downs, let people down a lot. A lot of that is just a pace of play. They wanted to go more run heavy. I expect that to be sort of the case again. And when you factor in that Kerryon Johnson, albeit whatever his work is going to be, hopefully the more the merrier just for the game itself. But he's also going to get pass catching work. And now with Marvin Jones back, it is a little bit scary season long. But yeah, for this week, it looks fine. The matchup is fantastic. You've already touched on the Peterson aspect of it. And I imagine later in the week, I hope the ownership doesn't build there, but it's somebody that I personally probably have to look more into a little bit more in terms of redraft. A big concern for me as I say this and got him literally last night would just be the mouths to feed out there. But DFS, not as much of a concern as that would be for season long.
All right. So sub 6K, Alshon Jeffrey, another guy that was falling pretty far in redraft leagues this year. I think a lot of people forgot that he was playing injured for the past 2 seasons and is finally healthy. Definitely some mouths to feed in Philly, but I think one thing people do wrong, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes. This isn't to say I love Alshon for week 1, but in general, is they say, oh, there's too many mouths to feed on this team. And ignore entirely that this team's projected to score like 30 points a week. If that's the case, you might have a lot of mouths to feed, but if you're going to be moving the football, if you're going to have a high time of possession and you're going to be scoring points, it's not as important. And we kind of just discussed that with Winston and the amount of opportunities that these pass catchers are going to see. Is there anyone sub 6K in this 5 to 6K range that you feel good about? DJ Moore against the Rams getting some hype this year. Mike Williams getting a lot of hype in LA based off of his touchdown numbers last season. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I mean, if sub 6K, if we're going to kind of cut that off at the 5K number,
range. And then we'll talk like true value after that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the 6K range, honestly, for me, it's right now Tyler Boyd and a little bit of a Cooper Kupp is where I'm focusing the most. And then right at 6K and Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's somebody who overall broke out a little bit last year. Now he's going to take over the Doug Baldwin slot role that was just fantastic with Russell Wilson. Started to become great for him last year in very limited usage, or more limited than it will be this year. And it's against this team in Cincinnati that's just been terrible. 26.5 total for the team in Seattle. I like the opportunity for Lockett running out of the slot. Talented kid who started to have his breakout last year. So I have interest there at the flat price point. And then Tyler Boyd at 5,800. We talked about it, and you really hit on it with Leonard Fournette in terms of the efficiency not mattering as much once the opportunities come more. You can kind of say that a little bit for Tyler Boyd. He wasn't as efficient as you would like when A.J. Green wasn't out there. He's kind of acting as a true number 1 wide receiver. And it's worrisome that his total is it the second lowest on the slate at 16.5?
Yeah.
That's very worrisome. But if you tell me that there's a great chance he runs out of the slot, especially with no Green there, and he's going to see around 10 targets or double-digit targets, that's hard to ignore. I don't like the total at all. I don't like the potential slow pace in the game. Lots of rushing for Seattle happening maybe in the second half here. But that's a spot that stands out. Spots that you were saying, or you hit on Mike Williams getting all the hype. It's somebody that in other weeks I'm going to target, especially if he's at this price point. But the offensive line there is just too scary for me to think that there's going to be enough time for the majority of the game to kind of take those shots that Williams is very touchdown dependent on. So in the 6K range, 5 to 6K range, it's probably the Lockett's the guy I like the most, which I guess correlates with the price point. And then Tyler Boyd. And that's mainly where I'll be getting to. Cooper Kupp is somebody I have to look a little bit more into as the week goes on, because that pace and that total in that game is going to go over noticed. Just lots of targets out there.
All right. Yeah, and then you got guys like Landry who, from a PPR standpoint, are fine, but not the biggest upside, not a huge red zone threat. DJ Moore with a pretty tough matchup, but we did see his target counts go up pretty notably when Devin Funchess was either off the field or really inactive or just limited last year towards the end. All interesting spots, but I don't think they're premier spots either. Let's hit the value options here. Below 5K, it's a really deep position. I saw someone in chat say wide receivers too deep, like so much to choose from. And he's right. Once you get down here, though, there's always a couple of these sub 5K guys that go off and make a huge difference. You see them, in the Millie Maker winners, tournament winners each week, because you need something like this. You need them to break off something big or just get peppered with targets. You've got Deshaun Jackson, broken finger, but he expects to play. Christian Kirk, another guy who's preseason kind of hurt his stock a bit, but very limited opportunity. There are a number of guys down here. Is there anyone, though, that you look at and he just stands out to you right away? You say, this is the guy that I need to be targeting down here. It could be anything below 5K all the way down to the minimum salary mark.
Yeah, there's a handful. The one that's going to stand out, just get a ton of ownership, is D.D. Westbrook. After what he did in the preseason week 3 game, 7 targets on, or he had seven targets on 10 pass attempts from Foles in that game. And honestly, usually you'll get a lot of hype there, but I'm buying into this hype. 89% of his routes were run out of the slot last year. That's obviously a spot that you want your receivers, if they're talented, to run out of. And then he's going to be going up against Kendall Fuller, who was maybe the worst cornerback out of the slot in general last year. So it's a great matchup. He's going to get peppered with targets out of the slot. And again, this is a game that might shoot out overall 24.5 implied team total. So DD at 4,800 is just fantastic. But yeah, whoever said that in chat is absolutely right how deep this goes. $4,200 Curtis Samuel. These are all the guys that are getting a ton of hype and probably going to garner ownership. A name that I would look at is sort of a potential pivot away. And really, if we want to go all the way down, $3,100 Chris Conley is a very 1% or lower GPP dart throw that you want to kind of keep an eye on if you are going to do a game stack pretty much and you want to get very different with it. Chris Conley, albeit some guys were injured in week 3 of the preseason, he still ran a snap on every single Nick Foles drop back. That was more than D.D. Westbrook. He saw a target, got called back for a penalty. But in the preseason, he was getting hyped up in camp as the guy that Nick Foles was targeting the most. Just didn't actually pan out in that game. And I do expect DD to kind of lead this team in targets if I had to bet on it for week 1. But Chris Conley at 3,100 is going to be running on the outside in potentially 2 wide receiver sets, because their number 2 and 3 wide receiver right now, due to injury, just due to overall depth, is not set in stone, even with the depth charts being released. But he'll be out there for a very high number of snaps, if not leading the team in snaps at 3,100 in a game that potentially is a shootout if you want that GPP pivot away. And then Damian Willis, $3,000 flat. I'd rather Chris Conley. But he's the guy who's going to be starting in place of A.J. Green. Again, rather Tyler Boyd on his own team. But if you're talking about guys who are min-priced or $3,100 to take stabs on, I prefer Conley. But those are guys who are going to see a ton of opportunity in terms of snap percentage. Maybe not targets and doing things with them, but snap percentage for GPPs is something to look at the very low end if we're jumping just all the way to the bottom of it.
Someone that I'll pay attention to, probably not in week 1, but going forward, is Albert Wilson.
Yeah.
With Kenny Stills gone, look, very difficult matchup. Miami's going to get blasted at the line of scrimmage. I get that. But if Albert Wilson stays sub 4K and they actually get a decent matchup going forward, which they will get many, he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. But for week 1, that's a very difficult ask, especially not even at minimum salary. All right, Sal, let's close it out. Tight end position, working our way from the top, middle, and down to the bottom tier. Oh, by the way, NFL Strategy is the sign-up code to get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus membership at awesemo.com. NFL Strategy, all one word, gets you the ownership projections, player projections, all of the MLB content that we still got out there, and all of the tools that were made and developed and used every day by Awesemo himself. So check it out. All of our stuff behind paywall. To get that first month 50% off, use the code NFL Strategy. And if you just want to check out some of the free stuff, you're not ready to yet, create a free account. A lot of our content is free. All of our seasonal stuff and some of our daily stuff at awesemo.com. All right, Kelsey against Jacksonville, highest total of the slate. Kittle against Tampa Bay. Ertz against Washington. This is the one single tier. It's the only tier where you really only have like 3 guys each week to discuss in their own area.
Yeah.
Are you paying for tight end at a position, this is important, at a position that gives us some value, like a Hunter Henry sub 4K or a number of other players that we'll discuss here? Is it worth paying a premium for one of the 3 best tight ends in football?
Yeah, right now to me it's not. And you can get to it, so it makes it a lot more enticing this week when we just talked about the value for however long at running back and wide receiver. But for me this week it's not. I think Travis Kelce almost matchup proof, but even in that matchup it's very good. There's departures on the Jacksonville defense, especially at linebacker, that are going to be a very, very big loss in a spot where he was already dominating this defense in a way. They gave up 16.5 fantasy points per game to the tight end last year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but for the tight end position, that was top 5 in the league. Again, high total. So Kelce, if I'm paying up, I'm going all the way up. But like you kind of hinted on, Hunter Henry, that range there. You have Evan Ingram, who's very cheap at 4,800. On this slate, I want to prioritize in terms of getting different wide receivers, running backs, and I think a lot of people are going to be paying up at tight end because they can. But again, we'll see on the ownership on Thursday pans out. Right now, I lean to not get to it, but it's going to be a very easy pivot for me too if there's just no ownership on those guys.
Right. I think that makes a big difference. I wouldn't be surprised to see Tampa Bay and San Francisco turn into a shootout, and head over that, I think, 49.5 point total. It's interesting, though, because Kittle played with a carousel of quarterbacks last year, and now you've got Jimmy Garoppolo. I still think he is your best option in this offense. I don't deny that or doubt that even remotely, but it will be interesting to see what type of chemistry they have together. Kittle led the league in yards after reception last year, which is pretty outstanding given the position. This man could rumble, but he could also pick up some speed. Do you see him continuing that this year? And is he, I know you say you don't see yourself paying up for that this much this week, but should Kittle be priced that much based off of last season?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you kind of try and take out the positions of it and kind of see him as a wide receiver is what he's been lining up as. He's been in all over the field, all over wherever they want to put him in the on the line. So on the line out wide, Kittle at 6,600. If he's a wide receiver, similar things can be said for Kelce, Ertz. That's a fantastic play against Tampa Bay. So when you look at it that way, it becomes more attractive. And I could probably look at it that way a little bit more too. So I think he's definitely worth it. You mentioned the fact that a lot of his production was coming, pretty much all of it, with just guys like CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins. But I think that's actually a positive thing. He had worse quarterbacks, now going to get a better levels above than Jimmy Garoppolo. He was able to sustain.
It certainly should be a good thing, for sure.
Yeah,
it should be, yeah.
One of the best seasons ever as a tight end is what he sustained last year from 2 maybe not very bad quarterbacks, but not good quarterbacks compared to Jimmy G. So, yeah, I expect a great season again from Kittle, top-end guy who, 6,600 in a game that could shoot out. And looking at the pace right now, it's actually changing my mind as I look at it. The only thing I would say is Tampa Bay was actually pretty stingy, although overall in the secondary, not great. Linebackers pretty good last year against the tight end position, and those linebackers have stayed pretty fixed, less than 10 fantasy points per game to the tight end position.
Very nice. Yeah. I was worried last year that Ertz wouldn't get enough volume with all those bodies there, and he goes ahead and breaks the single season reception record. Yeah. Granted, they dealt with a litany of injuries, but still, Wentz loved him, Foles loved him. I expect that to be the same case this season. If you wanted to pay for Ertz here, even though you and I said earlier in the show that we expect them to run 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, I still think Ertz is just one of those guys that Wentz will lean on week in and week out. But I ask you this, in one word, if you had to play Kelce, Kittle, or Ertz this week, who would it be in cash?
Kelce.
Okay. And in tournaments, still Kelce?
Yes.
Okay. It's funny because that is the top tier, but Kelce's kind of the tier of his own, and then it's Kittle and Ertz. This is where it gets really interesting, though. OJ Howard, you talk about the hype train. OJ Howard has been on the hype train, and we put him there, everybody. Evan Ingram, massive road dogs against Dallas, but you know they're going to have to throw the ball. Very weak receiving core there with Tate suspended, Odell Beckham gone. Ebron, I have zero faith in. Just look at his numbers with Doyle on the field and with him off the field, and now consider that with Andrew Luck gone. I'm not even considering Ebron here. Maybe you have a different opinion. I think Hunter Henry at sub 4K. Go back and look at his numbers in the first 2 seasons he played when he was healthy. In some of the advanced metrics, Hunter Henry was at the top of his position. Really impressive stuff. So I do think there are some options here. Once you get further down, it gets a little ugly. We could talk about Greg Olsen. We could talk about Jordan Reed, but Philly has done a very good job of curtailing production to tight ends. Slightly different personnel there, but still difficult. Let's bang out these cheap tight ends here and head out.
Yeah, the one that stands out is Hunter Henry. You said just yards per route run, all those types of metrics that are seen as predictive and elite stood out from years ago. Now the injury is, how does that affect him? It seems that it hasn't affected him too much from preseason talk, but we have to see game action on him. Looked okay preseason wise. But Hunter Henry is the spot that I would go to for the exact reasons that I liked Keenan Allen. Middle of the field, short passes, Indiana's going to give it up. And when you're at the tight end spot, if you're not paying up, you really can't expect that much from your tight end if you're not going to get to Kelsey or Kittle. You would like to see it, but what you're wanting there is just targets and the possibility of receptions, which is exactly what Indy is going to allow. OJ Howard, the thing I will say about him is he didn't see, so he had a hype train, he still does. I was hoping it would come down. We didn't see really any looks in the preseason, although he ran a snap or he ran a route on every single snap and drop back for Jameis Winston. So I do like that. So I think the opportunity is going to be there, miles ahead of Cameron Brate, in my opinion. But yeah, Hunter Henry is the spot that I gravitate towards. Really nothing below that I want to get to. There's so much value that I don't think you have to punt tight end like we probably will be doing for the next 16 weeks into the postseason. If you're not going to pay up, you usually punt. But right now there are some just cheaper values in really the Hunter Henry range is where I'm going to signify. Evan Ingram, somebody who I had a lot of confidence in, still do. Sterling Shepard seems like he's going to play now. I've been practicing without a splint for about a week, they were saying. So that kind of takes some hype away from Ingram since you have Saquon going to be catching a lot of passes. Shepard for sure out of the slot, probably going to be a very underrated season right now, being quiet because of the injury. But Ingram at that price point, it's still too cheap. So I would probably rank it in the cheap plays in that range. Hunter Henry, Ingram, and then Howard in that order, in my opinion. So kind of backwards, reverse price it.
Yeah, I honestly don't even think Shepard playing is going to hit Ingram all that much. And the only reason is, like, who else is there? Cody Latimer? Like
Benny Fowler.
Right, Benny Fowler. Having 3 guys, 2 pass catchers really viable, and 1 running back who's clearly going to get a lot of work, but still 1 running back. I think at a tight end position where you generally don't see, double-digit targets a game, I think Ingram can still command enough volume to be viable. Not a top option, but certainly one that should be considered at the tight end position.
Yeah.
What about down to the Olsens and I think Austin Hooper in spots this year will be solid, but against Minnesota, I probably won't get there. Mark Andrews, we talked about earlier against Miami. Someone said in chat, you better mention Jason Witten. Well, here's your Jason Witten mention. That's as far as I'm going with it, bro. Anybody else down there at the bottom?
No, you said Austin Hooper just due to price. If I had to go all the way down there, is maybe Austin Hooper because I think there's a very good point per dollar value in him. But honestly, just transparent, probably not going down there. Mike Gesicki seems some weeks to be getting hype out of camp in Miami. And then other weeks it's just nothing. Last year it wasn't much at all. But you do have Fitzpatrick out there. He's going to throw much more. They're trying to utilize Gesicki more. So if you really want to take a punt at it, but I wouldn't recommend punting that low this week because there are guys, like you said, and I think that's a really important thing to focus on is opportunities for tight ends are huge. Like if you're going to get Travis Kelce, Kittle seeing 10 targets, that's wide receiver elite territory. If you can get Evan Ingram seeing 6, doesn't sound like a lot, but that's elite for a tight end. And
right.
At that price,
and they're also, generally speaking, tight end targets are high percentage targets too.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
high percentage and also lots of the time red zone looks. So
for sure.
I'm not going to be going below, honestly. Austin Hooper maybe gets a look for me, but probably not going much below a Hunter Henry at this position.
All right. So in a later show, we'll spend more time talking about some of these defenses. But because we've gone throughout the positions and the salary tiers, just give me your top option at the top, middle, and lower tier. If there's no one at the lower tier, feel free to let us know. But we're going to get out of here. We appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. A long show, but a good way to kick off the season. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed the show and want to hang out more and do more of this with us. It allows us to keep these things going, and we appreciate you for it. So let's go ahead and give us and by the way, Sal, great stuff, man. I'm glad to have you on this show with me and with us at Awesemo.
Thank you. So wait, so just the tight end position? What did you say?
At defense, just your favorite option at the top tier, middle tier, and lower tier, and then we out.
Yeah, definitely. So lower tier, I'm actually I'll start there. I'm actually liking Miami. So you do have Lamar Jackson, who's in a decent spot, but overall their total is low. We don't think we have that much confidence in Jackson and any pass catchers there. So Miami is just totally bottom price, pretty much at 2,100. Middle of the road, you have $3,000.
And by the way, sorry to cut you off, but it's such a volatile position where a team could allow 25 points and have a defensive touchdown and outproduce the team that allowed 3 points with no turnovers or touchdowns.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, honestly, my research for defense is just so minimal. Unless there's an obvious spot where I think there are actually a few on this slate, then maybe I get to it. But it's all about who gets the pick six that week, which somewhat predictive on can you get pressure. But other than that, can you predict if a guy's going to return it 70 yards after he catches it? No. So I would say –
who was the Houston quarterback the backup that threw like a pick six in 4 straight games? Why is that escaping me?
No, I don't know. Wait.
Oh, really? It was only a few years ago. Chat will help me out on this.
Not Matt Schaub. That wasn't that.
No, it was Matt Schaub. Yeah.
Was Matt Schaub?
Yeah, it was Matt Schaub. Yeah. And then pick six Peterman was another, or what was it? 5-pick Peterman?
Oh, yeah. That was like in a half.
Oh, that was brutal. And for some, apparently, Gruden loves him out there. But
but I think he got placed on. Was it Peterman that got placed on IR, or did he sign somewhere?
No, he got placed. At least I believe I saw that yesterday, right?
Okay.
Yeah. What do you got? Sorry for cutting you off there.
No, you're fine. So I guess I would say is just build your lineup out, and whatever defense sounds good in that range, go for it. Never prioritize the defense because of that reason. Top end though, the Eagles are like one that just stands out. The Redskins' offensive line they just signed Donald Penn like off the street. They have just guys who are open gates, injuries, retirement. That line is terrible. I'm not shocked if you see 5 sacks from this Eagles front, which is a very good front. And then middle of the range, the Chargers make sense to me against Jacoby Brissette. Bottom tier, we said Miami. But honestly, don't put too much stock into any of those names. Those are the ones that stand out to me for reasons. There's actually something behind it. But like we said, it's so volatile. I honestly hate that defense as a position that you have to pick because it makes it much more of a gamble.
Yeah, it certainly does. If there were one defense, I think, that stands out, the Jets are just not expensive. And I think Josh Allen makes enough mistakes to where this could be a very interesting spot for them. But I think they'll be chalky.
I think at that price point, it's good. Yeah, I have no idea what the ownership will be on them, honestly. I think that just their front is so good that there's going to be pressure, and that's not going to be a high total game. So what you really need is just sacks. And can you get to the person, the quarterback, force pressure, get sacks, and then if you have pressure, potentially bad throws or batted balls, that could be turnovers. So that adds up for the Jets front. So that makes sense to me. I don't know the ownership, though, right now. I really can't I can't see where ownership's going to go. Like, the Eagles stand out as such a good play because of the offensive line woes right now for Washington. It's disgusting, but they're so expensive, so I don't know.
I hear you, man. Anyway, that'll do it for us. Quite a long show, but an enjoyable one. You can't go too long when you're talking NFL football, especially from a DFS standpoint. Thanks to all you guys for hanging out with us. And we'll be back tomorrow, myself and Chris Baggs, breaking down. We didn't have time to get to the projections because we talk a lot. So we'll do that tomorrow, and we'll take a first look at the ownership projections for awesemo.com. Very excited about that, and whatever else Spags has up his sleeve. Then Sal will be back with me on Thursday to go game by game, breaking them down in depth. Everyone, well, that won't go 4 hours. And then Manny Laura and Chris Randone on Friday doing some dummy crunches, looking in the Fantasy Cruncher, some exciting stuff to close out the work week. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show.